The moment the plasma bolt tore through the outer hull of the shuttle, Quinn Eldridge knew things were about to go very sideways. He didn't have time to brace as the ship jerked violently, throwing him sideways into the bulkhead. The jarring impact cracked something in his ribs, definitely not a bruise. His legs folded beneath him, and he hit the floor hard. Alarms screamed, lights flashed red, and smoke hissed from somewhere near the rear propulsion panel. Quinn coughed, rolling onto his back, trying to blink his vision clear. "Quinn, status," came a panicked voice through the comm. "Still breathing," he rasped, then winced. "Probably not for long if we don't land this thing." He fought to his feet, stumbling toward the manual override. The autopilot was fried, and the shuttle's descent toward the alien moon below was far too fast to be safe. His fingers, slick with blood from a gash across his left forearm, fumbled with the interface. Manual override engaged, the dashboard confirmed in a neutral tone. The hull groaned under strain as the shuttle punched through the exosphere of the moon. Quinn gritted his teeth, pulling the nose up as best he could. The ground rushed up through the viewport rocky, uneven terrain bathed in purple dusk. He didn't land. He crashed. The impact hurled him forward against the restraints, and the world went black. When he came to, he was being lifted onto a stretcher by three creatures who looked like upright amphibians in surgical garb. Their eyes blinked horizontally, their hands were webbed, and they moved with practiced calm. One of them spoke to another in a language he didn't recognize. The third leaned over him. "Do not move," it said in clipped standard. "You have sustained a fatal wound." Quinn blinked slowly. His head throbbed, and his chest felt like someone had parked a cargo hauler on it. He could tell he was bleeding from somewhere under his torso, warmth soaked into the ruined jumpsuit he wore. "Fatal," he croaked. "I've had hangovers worse than this." The alien nurse, if that's what it was, tilted its head. "Your internal organs are compromised. Significant hemorrhaging. You will not survive transport to the central facility." Quinn coughed, pain flaring in his ribs as he forced a grin that barely passed for humor. "A bit of bandage should fix it." The nurse paused, then turned to the others. "He believes bandage will repair his ruptured organs." The others conferred quietly while Quinn passed in and out of consciousness. He woke in a sterile chamber, walls made of soft green metal that pulsed faintly. A translucent curtain separated his bed from the rest of the mebe. His torso was wrapped in tight beige material that itched like hell, and his left arm was in a splint. Pain flared every time he tried to breathe too deep. A different alien entered, taller, with bioluminescent ridges along its neck. It tapped on a display beside the bed, then looked at him. "You survived." "Yeah," Quinn muttered. "Guess I'm just too stubborn to die." "You should not be alive. Your liver was ruptured. 2 ribs fractured. A shard of metal had pierced your abdomen by 6 centimeters. Quinn closed his eyes. "How long was I out?" 3 days. He nodded, then winced. "That tracks. You were stabilized by field medics who insisted it was futile. We preserved your body for study. You revived unexpectedly." "Wait, you thought I died?" "Yes," the alien said, not unkindly. "Your vitals ceased. You resumed them without external stimuli." Quinn frowned. "I flatlined." "Correct." He groaned. "Well, that explains the headache." The alien paused. "You require further treatment. Your bones are healing, but slowly. Your species' biology is inefficient. Tell me something I don't know." The medbay became a cage after a week. Quinn wasn't allowed out of bed without assistance. The aliens, members of the Threxian Consortium, were not hostile, but they were baffled by him. Every visit came with more scans, more questions, more quiet astonishment. "You do not metabolize toxins through your primary respiratory system?" one asked. "Nope. We've got livers for that. Or kidneys. Or both. And you consume carbon-based vegetation despite its lack of nutrient density?" "Tastes good grilled." They watched him like he was a glitch in a program. Eventually, he was allowed to sit up. Then stand. Then, after 2 weeks, shuffle around the mebe with a cane. One afternoon, as he limped past the observation deck, he overheard 2 medical technicians speaking. Reg and Pack didn't work on him. His cells refused to replicate at expected pace. "He's healing, though. Just slower. But he shouldn't have survived the crash at all. Maybe their species uses pain as a survival mechanism." Another said. He thought a bandage could fix organ failure. A 4th technician leaned in. "He smiled when we told him he was dying." Quinn cleared his throat loudly. They turned, startled. "Just so you know," he said, "I wasn't smiling. I was trying not to puke." 3 weeks after the crash, he was relocated to a diplomatic outpost on the edge of Threxian territory. The Federation had finally made contact, and a retrieval envoy was on its way. In the meantime, he was to be studied politely by scientists and medical experts who treated him like a walking paradox. A Threxian doctor named Velen took personal interest. Sleek and soft-spoken, she was the closest thing Quinn had to a friend on the station. "You were in stasis for 2 minutes," she told him during one of their sessions. "No brain activity. No pulse. Guess I'm just built weird. You should not trivialize your trauma." "I'm not. Believe me, the cracked ribs remind me every morning." She hesitated. "Why did you say it?" "Say what?" "That a bandage would fix it." Quinn leaned back in the reclining chair, watching the blue glowing ceiling. "I was scared. Bleeding out. Didn't want to die with some stranger telling me it was over. So I said something stupid." Velen made a note on her pad. "You used humor as a psychological defense." "Yeah, that's what we do. Laugh, curse, cry. Sometimes all at once." She looked up. "Do all humans respond this way?" "Not all," he said. "But a lot of us will crack a joke before we crack." By the end of the 5th week, Quinn could walk unaided. His ribs still ached, worse in the mornings, but his arm was out of the splint, and the scar along his side itched constantly. Velen cleared him for light exercise. He used the time to explore the Outpost's Arboretum, a towering dome with simulated gravity and imported plant life. There he met others, mostly Threxians, a few from the Ilari, tall insectoid beings with translucent wings. They gave him space, watched him covertly. One day, a young Threxian technician approached him. "Are you the one who survived the fatal wound?" Quinn nodded. "You said a bandage would fix it?" "That's what I said." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I had nothing else. No medics, no family, no backup. Just a hole in my gut and a hope I wasn't done yet." The technician didn't respond right away. Then, softly, "We do not speak when death comes. We accept it. Maybe that's where we differ. We don't accept anything unless we absolutely have to." A week later, the retrieval envoy arrived, a Federation cruiser with 2 human medics, both clearly shocked when they saw the condition of the crash site and the alien facility. "You were clinically dead," one of them said after reviewing the Threxian data. "How are you even standing?" "Good old-fashioned stubbornness," Quinn replied. But when he boarded the cruiser, he turned one last time to Velen. "Thanks for keeping me alive." "You kept yourself alive," she said. "We just didn't get in the way." As the shuttle lifted off, Quinn looked down at the outpost, nestled like a green jewel in the rocky moon. He touched the healed scar on his side. "Next time," he muttered, "I'll pack more than a first aid kit." End of part 1. The Federation cruiser had barely cleared Threxian airspace before Quinn realized he'd traded one kind of discomfort for another. The med bay aboard the cruiser was crisp, white, and sterile in the most literal sense. Every surface gleamed like it had been scrubbed by someone with a grudge against microbes. The overhead lights hummed faintly, a lullaby for headaches. He sat propped up on a diagnostic recliner, a pale mesh blanket thrown across his lap. The 2 human medics, Dr. Nia Talbot and Chief Specialist Darren Holt, hadn't stopped poking at him since he'd stepped aboard. They were efficient, focused, and visibly unnerved by the Threxian medical logs. "Your clotting factors didn't even stabilize until the 4th day," Nia muttered, scrolling through the biometrics on the wall display. "You should have gone into irreversible shock." Holt looked up from the portable scanner. "There's no precedent for this. Your hemoglobin dropped to 1/3 of baseline and rebounded without transfusion." Quinn shook his head. "Kind of hoping you'd tell me I'm just lucky and hand me a sandwich." "You shouldn't be talking at all," Nia said, not looking away from the data stream. "Your diaphragm tore in 2 places. A normal recovery would have required 2 months of assisted respiration." He tapped the side of his head. "Maybe I've got some backup organs nobody told me about." Holt straightened. "That wouldn't explain the immune response. You didn't reject the Threxian wound polymer. That stuff's designed for organisms with hemocyanin, not hemoglobin." "I don't know what any of that means," Quinn said, "but it sounds like I'm either a miracle or a lab accident." Nia finally turned to face him. "You're not a miracle. You're a problem. We don't understand how you're still alive." "Well," he said, shifting under the blanket, "that makes all 3 of us." She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick medical tablet. "We're forwarding your biometrics to Central Archives. Until we get clearance, you're grounded from active duty." Quinn blinked. "I'm not even on duty." "You are now. They'll want to run full physiological baselines, genetic mapping, possibly even a neural echo." He exhaled slowly. So I don't get a sandwich. Holt handed him a protein bar the size of a small brick. Fantastic. Chalk-flavored regret. 2 hours later, he was relocated to a private recovery chamber. The walls weren't green like the Threxian outposts, they were gunmetal gray, with a single viewport showing the stars crawling past like slow-moving embers. The bed was too firm, the air too dry, and there was a faint antiseptic smell that clung to the corners of his nose. He lay back and stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the ache in his side. The pain had dulled into something manageable, but it still pulsed when he moved too fast or laughed too hard. A soft knock, habitual, pointless on an automatic door, preceded Nia's entrance. She held a small console under her arm and didn't bother sitting down. "You're being transferred to the Helix Array," she said. "Specialist facility for anomalous physiology. Sounds like a real party. They're going to take samples. All kinds. Blood, marrow, tissue. Maybe even cerebrospinal fluid." Quinn groaned. "Are you telling me this to prepare me or to scare me?" "I'm telling you this so you don't mouth off and get sedated." "Can I mouth off a little and just get mildly tranquilized?" She didn't smile. "You died, Quinn. And then you didn't. That makes you a top-tier medical anomaly. That means people in lab coats are going to start treating you like a puzzle. I've been treated like worse. Not by xenobiologists with unlimited funding. I don't like being studied." "That's unfortunate," she said, "because you're fascinating." Later, as the cruiser dropped into orbit above the Helix Array, he got his first look at the facility. It wasn't a station so much as a floating labyrinth, a tangled mass of modules, observation pods, and docking nodes that looked like someone had tried to build a hospital while playing zero-gravity Tetris. The whole thing rotated slowly, casting long segments of shadow across its own hull. "Looks like a prison," he muttered. "It kind of is," Holt said from behind him, "but with better cafeteria options." They docked at an auxiliary port, and he was escorted by 2 security officers who wore unmarked uniforms and didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. His new room was smaller than the one on the cruiser, but it had a desk, a wall screen, and a cot that didn't actively hate his spine. There was no window. Within an hour, the examinations began. A tall, rail-thin xenobiologist named Dr. Kess entered with 2 assistants and a cart loaded with tools that Quinn didn't recognize. Kess had a clipped accent, long fingers, and the air of someone who'd never lost an argument. "You will remain still," he said, not unkindly. "Any resistance will be recorded as non-compliance. Can I at least pick the arm you jab first?" No, the first test involved a neural conductivity scan. They strapped a mesh cap over his head and watched as the display flickered with waves of color and numbers he didn't understand. Then came the blood draws, 3 from each arm, followed by fingertip samples and a bone density probe that made his teeth buzz. "Are you always this thorough?" he asked during a break. "You are the first known case of spontaneous autonomic restoration post-clinical death in a human," Kess replied. "Thorough is a requirement. Did you ever consider I just didn't want to die?" Kess didn't look up. "Desire does not override cellular degradation. Maybe not in your species." Kess paused. "You are suggesting your will to survive altered your biological trajectory. I'm suggesting maybe humans are wired different. We survive things we shouldn't all the time. That would imply a form of adaptive resilience not indicated in current models." Quinn leaned back on the examination table. "Then maybe your models need adjusting." The next day, they brought in a Threxian biologist named Sodal, who seemed both intrigued and mildly offended by Quinn's continued existence. Sodal's accent was thicker, his manner more formal. "You were treated with a compound designed to stabilize hemocyanin-based circulatory systems," he said. "By all logic, it should have induced vascular collapse. Instead, I got a cramp and a flashback to 3rd grade. We require a tissue sample from the site of initial injury." Quinn narrowed his eyes. "You want to cut into the scar? We will extract a dermal segment the size of a nutrient wafer. Make it 2 and I'll autograph 1. Sodal didn't react. "Do you experience any residual discomfort?" "Only when people start waving scalpels near my spleen." The extraction was clean, quick, and entirely unnerving. They used a local anesthetic that tingled like static and left a dark circle near his lowest rib. He watched the sample disappear into a containment tube and felt a strange detachment. "You're not going to clone me, are you?" "That would be unethical," Sodal said. That's not a no." By the end of the week, Quinn had been poked, scanned, and analyzed by 5 different species. The Alari wanted to measure his adrenal spikes during simulated trauma. The Varnexians were in a dream mapping sequence. A pair of Cerati twins tried to identify whether his resilience was linked to mitochondrial density. He started giving sarcastic answers just to see if anyone was paying attention. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting round of breath capacity trials, he was back in his room when the wall screen chirped. Quinn Eldridge, said a voice he didn't recognize. You are scheduled for a psychometric resonance interview in 20 minutes. Do I need to bring a gift? There was no response. He arrived at the interview chamber exactly on time. It was a circular room with no furniture, no screens, just a single Threxian seated cross-legged on the floor. The alien gestured for him to sit opposite. I am Vayari, the Threxian said. I will ask questions. You will answer honestly. Are you going to hypnotize me, or just stare into my soul? We do not hypnotize. We listen. Quinn sat down, legs stiff. Fire away. Why did you not accept death when it came? Because I wasn't ready. How did you know you were not ready? He hesitated. There were things left unfinished, such as people I didn't say goodbye to, mistakes I hadn't fixed. I didn't want to leave it like that. Vayari tilted his head. So you returned. Not for survival. For closure. Maybe. Or maybe I just hate losing. The Threxian said nothing for a long time. Then, you fascinate us because you contradict our assumptions. Perhaps it is not your biology that is extraordinary, but your refusal to obey it. Quinn stood slowly. I'll take that as a compliment. Vayari watched him go in silence. Quinn sat on the observation bench in the Helix Array's central diagnostics wing, one foot propped on the opposite knee, a compression sleeve rolled halfway up his forearm. A faint antiseptic tang lingered in the air, but the scent was fainter here than in the med labs. The room was circular, its walls embedded with soft pulsing veins of blue light, and a ceiling so high it disappeared into a haze. Across from him, a Cernari biophysicist with rust-colored scales and two independently rotating pupils was adjusting a stack of thin filtration discs inside a cylindrical analysis unit. The Cernari's name badge read, Ikresh, and he hadn't spoken since Quinn arrived 20 minutes ago. You know, Quinn said, I'd be more cooperative if I knew what you were testing for this time. Last guy just measured my yawns. Ikresh didn't look up. You exhibited a momentary surge in parasympathetic activity during sleep onset last cycle. We are determining if it represents an adaptive trait or a misfire. I call that dreaming. Your dreams produce elevated cortisol and dopamine simultaneously. That is not typical. Welcome to the human experience. Ikresh tapped a control pad, and the cylinder emitted a low hum. You have the most unpredictable autonomic responses we have recorded. It is difficult to isolate intentional behavior from reflex. Believe me, I've been trying to figure that out my whole life. A door near the back of the chamber slid open, and Vayari strode in, his posture looser than before. He gave a small nod to Ikresh, then approached Quinn with his hands clasped. We have concluded observation. You are no longer under biometric quarantine. Quinn raised his eyebrows. So what, you finished running me through the interstellar obstacle course? We have exhausted what we can learn without dissection. Fantastic. You rehearsed that line. Vayari's eyelids blinked in sequence. The Helix Council has deemed your survival a statistical aberration, but not a violation of known biological law. Ikresh interjected without turning. The probability curve was incorrect. The data now accounts for broader variance in human thresholds. So what does that mean? Quinn asked. You figured out the magic trick? Vayari tilted his head slightly. No, but we've accepted that your species may possess an unstable resistance to biological cessation. You mean dying? Yes. Well, Quinn said, easing off the bench, I suppose I'll put that on my resume. Ikresh finally turned to face him. You are not being monitored further. The Federation has approved your release from medical custody. I can go. You may return to civilian assignment under standard health review. Quinn stared at them both for a moment, then ran his hand through his hair. You're serious? Just like that? After all this? Vayari stepped closer. We are not satisfied. But we are finished. An hour later, he stood in the Helix Array's docking terminal with a small duffel, most of it filled by the boots and jacket he'd arrived in weeks ago. A Federation transport waited beyond the airlock doors, engines already humming. A Threxian attendant handed him a datapad with his clearance codes and itinerary. You are to report to the orbital hub above Mars for full reintegration, the attendant said. A standard debrief will follow. Quinn nodded absently. The corridor lights reflected off the transport's hull like a second sunrise. Just before he crossed the threshold, Vayari appeared beside him. There is a final matter. I thought we were done. You made a remark during your intake. About bandages. Quinn exhaled. I remember. I did not understand then. I do now. He looked at the Threxian. You finally figured out human sarcasm. No. I understood the purpose of hope disguised as absurdity. Quinn didn't reply. Vayari continued. You said it not to deceive, but to deny defeat. It was a form of rebellion. That's what we do. Sometimes loudly. Sometimes with a joke. The alien's throat ridges dimmed slightly. We do not possess that instinct. But we may study it further. Quinn clapped him on the shoulder. Just don't try to replicate it. You'll pull a metaphorical hamstring. He boarded the transport. The air inside was cooler, drier, and smelled faintly of old circuits and recycled oxygen. The pilot, a broad-shouldered Alari with a silver crest running from brow to nape, gave him a curt nod. Strap in. We're not waiting for the bureaucrats to change their minds. Quinn slumped into the seat, fastened the harness, and leaned back as the cabin vibrated with power. The docking clamps released with a shudder, and the ship rotated smoothly until the stars slid across the viewport like beads on a string. The pilot activated the drive, and gravity shifted just enough to make Quinn's ribs ache. He adjusted the strap. You ever get used to being a statistical aberration? The pilot didn't glance over. No, but it makes for good conversation. Quinn let the hum of the engines settle into his bones. The stars outside didn't look any different than before, but he did. Somewhere between the crash and the clinics and the endless tests, something had changed. He wasn't sure what exactly, but he knew this. When the universe told him he shouldn't be alive, he answered with a half-joke and a full refusal. And that, apparently, was enough.